They say she was the cruelest murderer in history. A countess who turned her castle into an altar of horror.
Hundreds of young women vanished, screams silenced in stone dungeons, and skin bathed in blood, seeking eternal youth.
Erzsébet Báthory, the Bloody Countess, a woman whose beauty and cruelty became legend.
But every legend has two faces. Was she truly a monster, or the victim of a conspiracy that needed to destroy her?
History condemned her as a vampire, a demon dressed in nobility.
But the question that still haunts us is another: historical reality, or a myth built to ensure she never escaped her cage.
This is the story of Erzsébet Báthory, the Bloody Countess, the immortal myth that confused humanity. In previous videos we already spoke of another name marked by darkness, Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, the man whose cruelty inspired the myth of Dracula. There we discovered how blood could become a symbol of power, of terror, and of eternity.
But today, we go even further, because we will not speak of a warrior who raised forests of stakes, but of a woman, a countess, whose myth was forever stained red.
Since the dawn of time, humanity has seen blood as more than a vital liquid. For some, it was sacrifice. For others, power. In ancient temples, on battlefields, in forbidden rituals, it was always the price to touch the divine.
Egypt offered blood to the gods to ensure harvest. The Aztecs spilled it to keep the sun alive. And in Europe, a myth arose that never died: blood as the key to eternal youth.
The symbol became obsession. Where others saw life, some saw immortality. Where others saw sacrifice, some sought eternal beauty.
Thus the vampire was born. Not a simple monster, but a reflection of humanity's desire to hold on to youth, even if the price was the lives of others.
And among all those stories, one woman turned myth into flesh. The Countess, noble and powerful, whose name would be remembered as the human example of that obsession.
Erzsébet Báthory, the woman who bathed her name in blood.
'16th century Hungary. A kingdom divided, caught between the pressure of the Holy Roman Empire and the relentless advance of the Ottomans. War was not an isolated event. It was the daily breath of the people.
In this world of fire and steel, Erzsébet Báthory was born August 7th, 1560, in the region of Nyírbátor. Her cradle was not humble. She belonged to one of the richest and most powerful families in all of Hungary.
The Báthorys were a feared dynasty. They ruled vast lands in Transylvania and Hungary. They owned castles, private armies, and wielded political influence that rivaled even the king himself. Erzsébet grew surrounded by privilege, yet also by shadows.
From childhood, she witnessed a world where cruelty was never hidden. It is said she saw brutal executions and the torture of prisoners in her family's courtyards. Some accounts claim she watched closely, as if those scenes were lessons disguised as punishment.
At the same time, Erzsébet received a refined education. She spoke Latin, German, and Greek, mastered diplomacy, writing, and estate management. She was intelligent, cultured, driven, and dangerous, for a world that tolerated no woman with real power.
But her mind and body were not free from shadows. Chronicles suggest she suffered sudden fainting and convulsions, symptoms we'd call epilepsy today. In that age of superstition, they were seen differently. Signs of possession, divine punishment, or the echo of a curse.
In 1575, at barely 15, Erzsébet was given in marriage to Ferenc Nadasdy, known as the Black Hero of Hungary, a noble warrior celebrated for his cruelty against the Turks. He was said to impale hundreds of enemies as warnings across battlefields.
Ferenc was no ordinary husband. He was a butcher, glorified by war. And Erzsébet, his young bride, learned from him that blood could be power, and fear, a weapon far sharper than any sword.
In the corridors of castles, beneath the echo of prayers and screams, the young noblewoman began to shape her character. Intelligent as a queen, ruthless as a soldier, and thus the myth of the woman history would remember as the Bloody Countess began to take form. High on a hill surrounded by dense forests and eternal silence stands the castle of Čachtice. It was not only Erzsébet Báthory's home, it was the stage where history turned her into legend.
Its stone walls, damp and cold, hid secrets the sun could never touch. Dungeons, basements, hidden corridors. A labyrinth where the echo of screams blended with the howl of the wind.
Čachtice was not just a castle. To many, it was hell on earth, a place where servant girls entered, but few ever left alive, where shadows seemed to watch, and every stone was stained with rumors of blood. The castle became the prison of her myth. Every hall, every tower, every wall was a silent witness to the stories that grew until she became the most feared woman of her time. The castle became the prison of her myth. Every hall, every tower, every wall was a silent witness to the stories that grew until she became the most feared woman of her time.
Čachtice ceased to be stone and mortar. It transformed into a monster of stone, an eternal accomplice of the Bloody Countess.
As the years passed, the stories multiplied. Young peasant girls who came to the castle seeking work never returned home.
Rumors spread that within Čachtice's damp walls, maidservants were subjected to cruel games disguised as discipline, needles driven beneath fingernails, scissors slicing flesh, fire slowly brought to the skin, and hunger used as an instrument of torment.
Fear became routine in the halls. The girls serving the Countess whispered of screams in the night, of locked rooms no one could enter, and of bodies vanishing into the darkness.
But the most disturbing rumor was also the most unforgettable. Erzsébet Báthory, obsessed with eternal youth, bathing in the blood of virgins, convinced each drop restored her fading beauty.
They said every torture was not merely punishment, but ritual. That the maidens did not die in vain, but a sacrifice to the vanity of a woman willing to defy nature itself.
dozens, others of hundreds. Some even claimed more than 600 young women fed her obsession. But within the shadows of the myth, the question remains: what was real and what was invented? How far did Erzsébet Báthory's hands truly reach? And how far did the imagination of those who painted her as a monster go? For in the darkness, truth and lies blur until they are indistinguishable.
The rumors had spread too far. The disappearances, the testimonies of terrified maids, the voices whispering of hidden bodies in the dungeons, finally reached the ears of King Matthias II of Hungary.
What began as the whispers of peasants turned into formal accusations? The myth had become a matter of state.
And in 1610, the royal palace ordered an official investigation. Armed soldiers stormed the castle of Čachtice. What they found confirmed the darkest suspicions.
Mutilated bodies in the dungeons, servant girls drained of blood, abandoned in dark corners, young women marked by unspeakable tortures, still breathing, trembling with sobs and fear.
The scandal shook all of Hungary. A countess, descendant of one of the kingdom's most powerful families, accused of murdering hundreds of virgins in the name of eternal beauty.
Rumors became accusations. Accusations became evidence. And evidence became the most brutal social condemnation of her time.
The fall of Erzsébet Báthory was not merely the downfall of a woman. It was the collapse of noble myth, transformed into a monster before the eyes of the world. The trial of Erzsébet Báthory was as strange as her legend. Dozens of witnesses spoke against her, terrified servants, peasants who had lost their daughters, soldiers who swore they had seen corpses inside the castle.
But she was never present in the courtroom. The Countess was never brought before the judges. Her lineage was too powerful, her surname too heavy to be stained by a public trial.
The true punishments fell upon her servants. They were tortured until they confessed and executed in brutal ways, a warning for all. But Erzsébet, the alleged mind behind the horrors, was never executed.
Her sentence was different, slower, more symbolic, more cruel.
In 1611, her sentence was declared life imprisonment within her own castle, a bricked-up room without windows, without light, only a small slit for food and air.
There, the woman who had ruled over lands and servants became a prisoner of her own myth, a specter trapped in stone, condemned to hear only the echo of her name.
Erzsébet Báthory died years later in the darkness of her cell. No witnesses, no final trial. Yet her story was only beginning to be born. For centuries, history described Erzsébet Báthory as the cruelest murderer that ever lived. The Bloody Countess, the Vampire of Hungary, a woman who sacrificed her humanity in the name of eternal youth.
But what if all this was a carefully crafted myth? What if Erzsébet was not the villain, but the victim?
Some modern historians claim that behind the screams and legends there was a more earthly motive, power and money. King Matthias II owed Erzsébet an enormous debt, and the Báthory family was too influential, too dangerous for the crown.
What better way to destroy a powerful woman than to turn her into a monster? What weapon more effective than fear to erase a surname from history?
The testimonies against her came mostly from tortured servants. The physical evidence, ambiguous. The number of bodies found never truly confirmed.
And yet, the legend worked. Erzsébet was walled in, silenced, her fortune stripped away. A perfect conspiracy, disguised as justice.
So, what was Erzsébet Báthory? A monster who bathed her skin in blood? Or a powerful woman, demonized by those who needed to destroy her?
Perhaps the only true blood spilled was that of the truth.
In 1614, Countess Erzsébet Báthory died in solitude, entombed within the stone walls of her castle. Her body remained in darkness, but her name was never buried.
For death did not silence her, it turned her into legend. History placed her alongside Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, and together they became the inspiration for a new myth: vampires.
Her figure multiplied in Gothic novels, in the dark tales of the 19th century, in the writings of cursed poets, and in the imagination of generations. Erzsébet was no longer a woman, she was a symbol, an archetype of terror, the Bloody Countess.
Bathed in blood, reborn in legend, transformed into the dark mother of every female horror.
And perhaps that was her true sentence. Not the bricked-up cell, not hunger, not solitude, but eternity. The fact that her name could never escape the shadow of monstrosity.
For Erzsébet Báthory did not die in 1614. She still lives in every story, every film, every whisper of terror when her name is spoken.
The Bloody Countess. Was she truly a monster? Or was she the victim of a myth that even today still drinks blood?